Have you ever found yourself wrecking something good? Right when it started to feel real, you push away the one who truly saw you. You quit the job that finally made you feel alive. You promise to change. Then shatter the promise before it lands. It's not because you're weak, or broken, or doomed to repeat the same mistake. It's because something inside you is trying to protect you, in the only way it knows how. What if I told you, the part of you that ruins things isn't the enemy, it's the part that once saved you, a long time ago, and it's still trying. But now, it might be time to meet that part face to face. There's something I discovered, not from a book, not from a quote, but in a quiet room, where I finally stopped running. And it changed everything. Ethan Miller looked perfect on paper. 34, software architect, lived in Boston, gym 3 times a week, had just gotten promoted, and 3 weeks ago, ended a relationship with someone who truly loved him, not because she did something wrong, but because she got too close, too real, too kind, and that scared him more than anything else. He told himself she deserved better, that he wasn't ready, that he had to work on himself. But that wasn't the truth, because this wasn't the first time. He'd been here before, different names, different moments, same ending. He would find connection. Then run from it, he would see success. Then ghost his own potential, he would promise change. Then sabotage it when it felt too close. It was like there was a part of him, watching from the shadows, waiting for things to feel too good. And when they did, that part would whisper, "This isn't safe." Ethan never heard the whisper directly. He only felt the results: sudden withdrawal, sudden silence, sudden fear, and a deep, gnawing shame. That came after, the kind that makes you stare at your phone, knowing exactly what you should say, and saying nothing. The kind that makes your chest tight when you see their name, because you miss them. But you're also afraid of being seen again, afraid of being known, afraid of what being known might destroy. So he sat, late at night, scrolling through old messages, trying to find a reason that would make it make sense, but he couldn't. Because deep down, Ethan wasn't confused, he was divided, and the part of him that broke things was winning, not because it was stronger, but because it had been with him longer, much longer. And that is where this story begins. It started with a question, one that didn't sound important at first, but it cracked something open. Ethan had been sitting in his therapist's office for weeks, giving polished answers, telling well-rehearsed stories, always circling, never landing, until one afternoon the therapist asked, "What's the first memory you have of someone saying you were too much?" Silence. Then something moved, not in the room, but inside him. His breath caught. His shoulders stiffened, and his mind went somewhere it hadn't visited in years. He was 8. He was laughing too loudly in the living room, retelling a joke he didn't even understand, and his father, already tired from work, snapped, "Jesus, Ethan, you're exhausting, just stop for once." That moment stayed not as a memory, but as a rule. Don't be too much, don't be too loud, don't take up space. It wasn't the only time, but it was the first time he remembered feeling like his presence was a problem. He didn't cry that day, he just nodded, and somewhere in his body, something shifted. A quiet agreement was made. I'll be easier, I'll be smaller, I'll disappear when needed. That agreement became a habit, that habit became a personality, and that personality was rewarded. Quiet Ethan, polite Ethan, reliable Ethan, the Ethan who always knew when to leave a room, just before someone asked him to. But that same Ethan was also the one who didn't know how to stay, didn't know how to trust love, didn't know how to accept joy without suspicion, because deep down he believed love was something you earned by being less of yourself, and joy was a trap that would cost you later. If any of this feels familiar, if there's a version of you trained by silence, praise, or punishment, then maybe, like Ethan, you've been carrying a rule that no longer serves you. If that resonates, Feel free to share your story below. Sometimes naming it out loud is the first step to letting it go, but for Ethan, that rule was about to meet its match not through willpower, but through understanding. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Ethan didn't understand the weight of that sentence. Not until his therapist introduced him to a word he'd never truly considered before. Shadow, not the kind that follows your feet on a sunny day, but the part of your psyche that holds everything you've denied, rejected, or buried. It's where the fear goes, the rage, the hunger, the unmet needs and unspoken pain, all the parts of yourself you were told were too much or not enough. They don't disappear, they go underground, and from there, they guide your life quietly, persistently, through patterns you can't seem to break, through impulses you don't fully understand, through sabotage that feels almost scripted. The shadow doesn't hate you, it's not your enemy, in fact. It thinks it's helping, because somewhere along the way you taught it that being fully yourself was dangerous. So it learned to protect you, by shrinking you, by silencing your needs, by making you disappear before anyone else could reject you. For Ethan, this realization landed like a cold breath on the back of his neck. He wasn't sabotaging his life because he was lazy, weak, or unworthy. He was doing it because a younger version of himself believed it was safer to fail on purpose than to succeed and risk being seen. That's the twisted loyalty of the shadow. It's not irrational. It's just old, built from truths that were once useful, but now only keep you stuck. Ethan started seeing it everywhere. The job offer he declined because it felt too much. The dates he left early without explanation. The creative ideas he abandoned halfway through, all of it traced back to the belief that being visible meant being vulnerable, and being vulnerable meant danger. But here's where things started to shift. Because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Once you name the shadow, you can choose to meet it, not to fight it, not to fix it, but to understand what it's been trying to say. All these years, Ethan began to notice something strange. Every time something good came close, he would feel a quiet panic, not loud, not dramatic, but deep, like a hum under the floorboards. A date would go well, and he'd cancel the next one, a compliment at work, and he'd downplay it, laugh it off, sabotage the momentum. It wasn't because he didn't want these things, it was because some part of him didn't trust them. That part wasn't angry, it was afraid, and it had been afraid for a long time. You see, when you've learned that connection leads to pain, success to judgment, visibility to punishment, then your body starts to associate the good with the threat. So what looks like procrastination, or ghosting, or emotional unavailability is actually a strategy, an old, wired-in survival pattern that says, if I ruin this now, at least I'm in control. Because if you're the one who ends it, you can't be left behind. If you downplay your wins, no one gets the chance to tear them down. If you stay invisible, no one can humiliate you. It's logic built in a different era of the nervous system, one where the goal wasn't thriving, it was surviving. Ethan saw this clearly the night he got the call. It was a job offer from a company he'd dreamed of since college. High pay, remote flexibility, a team that valued creativity, and the moment he hung up, he felt sick, not excited, terrified. He spent the whole night pacing, not because it was a bad offer, but because it was a good one. Too good, and good things had always cost him. So, almost without thinking, he drafted an email declining the role. But this time, he didn't send it. He stared at it, then asked himself a question. Who is this protecting? The answer came fast. A younger version of him, still afraid of being seen and rejected, still carrying the rule, don't be too much, still trying to save him the only way he knew how. That night, Ethan didn't delete the email. He saved it as a reminder that sometimes sabotage is just a symptom of loyalty to an outdated fear, and maybe it's time we thank those fears. Before we let them go, if you've ever felt afraid of succeeding, afraid of joy, leave a note in the comments, say, I see you, fear. It might be the first time that part of you ever felt seen, and sometimes being seen is all it takes to begin healing. Ethan didn't start with forgiveness. He started with paper. He sat at his kitchen table one night, lit a candle, and began writing letters not to people, but to parts of himself. He started with rage. Dear Rage, he wrote, I'm sorry I locked you away. I was taught you were dangerous, loud, shameful, but you were only ever trying to show me I was hurt, and no one saw it. Then came Shame. Dear Shame, I hated you for years, but you were the one who kept me small enough to survive. You whispered things I now know weren't true, but you were trying, in your own way, to protect me from being humiliated again. And finally, he wrote to Fear. That letter took the longest, because Fear had been with him the longest. Dear Fear, I've blamed you for holding me back, but I never once thanked you for standing between me and the things I wasn't ready for. You were never the villain, you were the guard dog, barking at shadows that once hurt me. Each letter took hours, not because the words were hard to find, but because the emotions were. Every time he touched a sentence, something in his chest clenched, not out of pain, a recognition, as if those parts had been waiting, years in the dark, just to be named. Something shifted after that, not overnight, not dramatically, but quietly. He stopped reacting the same way. When tension rose, he didn't shut down, he listened. When anxiety peaked, he didn't run, he breathed. And in moments when joy came close, he didn't flinch, he simply noticed, because when you befriend the shadow, you don't erase the darkness, you light a small candle inside it, just enough to see, enough to listen, enough to remind the younger version of you that you're not fighting him anymore, you're sitting with him, you're writing to him. And maybe, just maybe, he can finally rest. The dream came out of nowhere. Ethan was walking down a long hallway, old, wooden, dimly lit. Each door he passed had a name scratched into it: anger, shame, silence, doubt. He didn't open them, he just walked until he reached one door, with no name, only a small handprint. He hesitated, then turned the knob. Inside was a room that felt like childhood, a blue nightlight flickering in the corner, a stack of worn books by the bed, and in the center, a boy curled up, knees to chest, eyes wide open. Ethan didn't need to ask who he was, he already knew. It was the version of him that had made all the rules. The one who learned that speaking too loud made people angry, that asking for love was dangerous, that taking up space meant being punished. The boy looked at him, not with fear, but with expectation, as if he'd been waiting, not to be rescued, but to be remembered. Ethan tried to speak, but the boy shook his head, then pointed to the ceiling. There, written in chalk, were sentences, some he recognized. I ruin everything. I can't be trusted. If I get close, I'll be hurt. Others were newer. I deserve peace. Allowed to stay. I can be loved, even when I'm not useful. That's when Ethan realized the boy hadn't just been guarding pain, he had been rewriting it. Waiting for the adult Ethan to come back, and read the new story. When Ethan woke up, he didn't cry, he didn't panic, he just sat on the edge of his bed, with a kind of quiet he hadn't felt in years. He knew it was only a dream, but something inside had shifted, because when you meet the part of you that started the defense, you stop blaming it. You start parenting it, and that's the difference between repression and integration. You stop locking doors and start opening them, one small, gentle room at a time. Failure had always felt safer than success, because success meant being seen, and being seen once meant being hurt. Ethan never realized how deep that wiring ran, until he started looking back to the moments when things went well, and his first instinct was to pull away. The teacher who praised his art in second grade, and he stopped drawing for months. the girl who said she liked his smile, and he stopped smiling in photos, the mentor who offered him a shot at something bigger. And he ghosted the opportunity not because he didn't want it, but because part of him was trained to believe if they see all of you, they'll find something wrong. So he learned to dim the light not out of modesty, but as a shield, because dim is safer than dazzling. Low expectations are easier to survive than hope. Even joy, when you've been conditioned for pain, can feel like a trap, like a hallway you don't want to walk down, because you remember where it ended last time. And when he began naming this pattern, Ethan didn't feel shame, he felt clarity. It wasn't self-sabotage, it was self-protection. Just misdirected, old fear disguised as wisdom. So he started testing the edges. He said yes to a small speaking event. Even though his hands shook, he shared his writing with a friend. Even though his voice trembled, he let someone compliment him. And instead of brushing it off, he simply said, "Thank you, tiny rebellions," against an inner system that had been on red alert for decades. And each time, nothing terrible happened. No one laughed, no one punished, no one withdrew, and slowly, his body began to unlearn what it once believed. That safety didn't come from disappearing, it came from honesty, presence, staying, not because it's easy, but because it's real, and real is what he'd been longing for all along. Integration wasn't a dramatic moment. It didn't arrive with fireworks or revelation. It came in a kitchen at 7:42 a.m. when Ethan spilled coffee on his shirt side and didn't call himself an idiot. It came in a walk through the park when he saw a father snap at his kid and didn't judge the father because he remembered the weight of exhaustion and the silence of apology never said. It came in a text, a friend asking if he was free, and instead of checking his schedule, he checked his heart and said yes. That was integration, not a fix, a friendship with himself. Carl Jung called it bringing the unconscious into consciousness. Not to control it, but to understand it, to make peace with the parts of yourself you once tried to exile, the angry one, the needy one, the avoidant one, the scared one. You don't lock them out anymore. You give them a seat at the table, and slowly, you realize they stop screaming because someone finally listened. Ethan began to see it in the smallest shifts, the way he answered the phone without rehearsing, the way he said no, without guilt, the way he rested, without justification, because the war inside had paused, not ended, but paused long enough for breath, for softness, for space. He even caught himself laughing, really laughing, with a friend. And noticed something strange. He didn't brace for the fallout. He didn't wait for it to be taken. He just laughed fully. That's what wholeness sounds like, not perfection, but presence, not always light, but no longer afraid of the dark. Ethan hadn't become someone new, he'd simply become someone he didn't have to hide from, and that was enough. He didn't know he was ready until life asked him to show up, not in a grand way, but in the little ways that used to trigger panic. A date with someone new, dinner, conversation, eye contact that lingered just long enough. And Ethan didn't flinch. He didn't rehearse answers or scan for danger, he just stayed. It wasn't perfect. He still hesitated when she asked about his past, still paused when she offered praise, but this time, he noticed the pause and chose honesty over habit. That was new. So was the way he approached work. Before, deadlines had been weapons. Success was a trap now. They were just tasks, challenges, opportunities. He wasn't afraid of doing well, because he no longer believed he had to pay for joy with pain. That shift, small but seismic, echoed into everything. He began writing again, not for validation, but for presence, for play. He laughed more, cried more, called his sister to apologize for a silence he couldn't explain. She didn't need the details. She just said, "It's good to hear your voice again." And it was, because it wasn't just a voice, it was Ethan. As he really was, no mask, no script, no performance. He even found moments of stillness. Where the urge to run had once lived, mornings on the porch, coffee warm in hand, nothing urgent, just breath, just being. And when fear came knocking, he didn't slam the door, he opened it, nodded, said, "I see you," and let fear sit beside him without letting it drive. That's what healing looks like, not erasing fear, but walking with it and choosing not to obey. Not every day was easy, but every day was honest. And honesty, as it turns out, is where the real freedom lies. Ethan didn't have a big ending, no viral moment, no life-altering breakthrough caught on camera, just a quiet Tuesday morning, sunlight spilling across the floor, and a moment where he looked in the mirror and didn't flinch. He saw a man who had once run from everything good, not because he was broken, but because he was scared. He saw the boy who once curled up in a silent room, wishing someone would just knock on the door. And he saw the man who finally did, not to save him, but to sit beside him, to listen, to stay. That's what healing became, not a destination, but a decision, daily, gentle, deliberate, and in that stillness, Ethan whispered the sentence he once feared the most, ready to stop running. He didn't say it with force or triumph. He said it the way you exhale after holding your breath for years, soft, certain, free. And maybe that's what we're all waiting for. Not permission, not perfection, just that moment, when we look inside the rooms we once avoided and say, "I see you," to the anger, to the shame, to the fear, to the quiet child within, still hoping we'll come back. And when we do, the sabotage ends, not because we fought harder, but because we finally understood that every broken piece was never the enemy. It was the messenger asking again and again, "Will you finally see me?" So if you're here, still listening, still breathing, still wondering if it's too late, it's not. You're not broken, you're divided, and now you have the chance to come back to yourself, one breath at a time. If this story found you in a quiet moment, if it stirred something you've tried to silence, feel free to whisper it in the comments. I'm ready to stop running, not for me, for you, because you're not alone, and this is just the beginning.